Hello and welcome, mums and dads of Michaelhouse. Thank you sincerely for taking a little bit of time out on what is almost certainly a busy school night for what will be an introduction, although I'm sure the man on the right of your screen doesn't need too much of an introduction to parents of Michaelhouse at this stage of play. It'll be something of a retrospective and also a look into the future of sport at Michaelhouse. Before I introduce the man of the moment, I'm just going to plot a course, the way forward for tonight. I'm going to lead Ryan Ravenscroft through a few thought-provoking questions, hopefully unpacking some of the aspects of sports at Michaelhouse. And while I'm doing that, I'd encourage you to post some of your own questions. And to do that, a reminder for those of you who haven't done it before, look to the right of your screen where you're sitting at home, and in the chat box, please share your comments and thoughts. And then from there, I will skip past them or nick them off onto Ryan for a response. And so let's start off with an introduction. A man who's played 64 times, represented the South African men's hockey team 64 times, including what must have been a very memorable jaunt to the Athens Olympics in 2004. You skip it this side for 2 years, and shifting to an educational focus. Ryan, you spent 6 years as a director of hockey at Whitgift School in the UK, followed by a 2-year jaunt at Chatham Grammar. And then more locally, director of sport at Jeppe, a school with its own sporting pedigree here in South Africa. And then bringing a more educational, pastoral slant to things with your role as the deputy head at Clifton Prep in Durban. So you've been an administrator, you've been a player at all the hard and sharp edges of schoolboy sport. I think we'd have to search far and wide to find somebody with the pedigree of Ryan to kind of take sport at Michaelhouse into its future. Introductions aside, Ryan, we may as well jump straight in and let's grapple with a Netley question, one which is always polarizing. Crocs or Birks?
Jack of all trades, master of none, I would suggest in that. Thanks, Mary. I appreciate it. Crocs or Birks? Oh, testing one. Definitely Birks, I would suggest, in the Midlands, that's for sure.
A man of innate style and fashion. Let's dive straight into it. So, I mean, it's well documented, the challenges that you faced pretty much off the bat as you arrived here at Michaelhouse with the mud and the rain and the chaos. It must have been a pretty nerve-wracking start to what would have really been quite an imposing role. What was the toughest part of that baptism of fire?
Baptisms of fire. Whether or not we had to move fields on the day of a Clifton fixture with our muddy meadows. I suppose, Murray, moving the fixture for the Hilton Michaelhouse derby was exceptionally challenging. But to be fair, I felt the community and the parents and everyone from a Hilton Michaelhouse perspective were exceptionally supportive. Yeah, I think you could argue going to Pretoria Boys without water would have also been right up there. Blowing up of bridges over 2 weekends, that one materialized, one didn't. That was also a fascinating process. But ultimately, I think when the boys left the rags for their spelling on Saturday, that was probably my most stressful moment, whether to have spelling or not to spell. So yeah, that's where schoolboy sport is at the moment, that I'm worrying about spelling, to be fair.
Challenges coming at you from every angle. I guess for me, watching from the outside, watching the sports office at work, grappling with all of those challenges, certainly it was communication, which seemed like the obvious advantage at play there. Communication around all of those decisions and those last minute calls made it clear that these were not knee-jerk responses. They were well thought out. And kudos to handle those early challenges in the way you did. So I guess moving on, Ryan, you'd had a year as a Michaelhouse dad before you stepped into the hot seat as the head of sports at Michaelhouse. And aside from missing the gin and tonics on the side of the field, what is it like on the other side of the fence?
Did miss those gin and tonics on a Saturday. Well, I know, Mary, which parents should be allowed through the gates and which shouldn't as a result of that. I won't mention those names, but I'm sure they're smiling at present. I think it gave me very good insights, to be fair, to Michaelhouse and what parents' expectations are and what they are happy with and what they might need improving. So I think it was very valuable for me, to be fair. So I think it was almost a good interview process. However, now that I'm in the systems, the all I was of the school as a parent have only multiplied by hundreds, to be fair. Now that you're part of the systems, to see who your children are being taught by, educated by, and coached by is actually, to be fair, phenomenal. And I've really, my appreciation and gratitude to the school have just strengthened throughout, to be fair. So yeah, as a parent, I'm still am a parent, to be fair, and I still really enjoy watching my children play sport, and that shouldn't change. And I hope all our parents, when they do come to Michaelhouse or watch their children, they really focus on that and enjoy every single moment. But yeah, no, it's an incredible place, and what a privilege for me to be in this position, to be fair.
You've kind of made the segue into the next question, an easy one for me, Ryan. You talk about the coaches, the teachers who are also mentors between the cracks of the playing field and the classroom. What is your sense in what is quite literally a cauldron of schoolboy sport in South Africa, where we are sticking to the guns of our coaches primarily being teachers, educators, in an environment where professional coaching seems to be the movement that many schools are moving towards?
Yeah, I was actually having a very good discussion with some parents the other day, and we were alluding to a book that we both that they actually put me onto, which I've read, which is a book called Mindset. And the ultimate feeling from that conversation was, what outcomes do we want? So if your outcome is to have a professional rugby player who isn't able to pass maths or be part of the music curriculum or drama curriculums at a school, and is ultimately very one track focused, then that process is not for us, I would suggest. So the outcome wouldn't be, for me, favorable in terms of a schooling and education. That being said, is there elements where we can bring in people to help support it, who are at the top of their games from a professional perspective? But ultimately, the fact that we've got educators teaching and coaching our children is for me the best mentorship that can possibly happen at the moment. The balance is definitely there. There are expertise out there that we would be naive not to tap into, and those resources that we want to look at. But if I was to be frank, when I walk around the fields, and again, I'm very privileged at Michaelhouse that I get to walk around all the fields. Granted, my predecessor had a 4x4 buggy that I probably should be having. I've got wet shoes, and I do need to go shopping in the holidays.
For your step count.
Good for my step count. There's no doubt about it. And after eating so much bread here at Michaelhouse, I do need a step count. So, but I'm in a privileged position when I just walk around the fields and I just see so many boys playing and training, from the AstroTurfs to the rugby fields, to the soccer fields at the same time, to tennis, to walking into squash courts. There's just a hive of activity. So that doesn't happen at other schools. You are very much benchmarked into just A teams, where I feel Michaelhouse, its major strength is it tries to look after every boy that comes into the campus.
You're making things easy for me, Ryan. The next sort of line of thought that I wanted to pursue was, you've found yourselves in all sorts of educational environments: prep schools, co-ed schools, grammar schools, schools with some boarding. To what extent is a school that's just a boarding school, how much easier does that make the life of the athlete and the coach, or does it complicate it in any way? What does that bring to the mix?
I think being in the middle of nowhere doesn't help by getting certain coaches and people here. However, I feel that the boarding schools that are still surviving in South Africa, we have to look after that. One, being a parent that's seen my son grow in terms of a human being, to just seeing those your sons, your boys, around an environment, being able to be free, and going fishing when they can on a Sunday, or whether they walking around barefoot because it gets cold here. I can't understand you. I feel like, one of our dads said the other day, I feel like my old man when I'm telling people to put on shoes because it's cold, or turn off a light switch. But it makes these boys quite tough, to be honest with you. And I think it's quite a word in private schools. We're a tough boarding school, and I think that's something we need to hold on to. Tough can be misconstrued in different words, but I genuinely believe the Michaelhouse boy stands up and is counted when it's needed, to be fair.
Yeah, I think that many parents would be inclined to agree with you. And the fact that your hockey players also playing touch rugby and paddle after that, and surely this is good for kind of skills transfers across the board. You also mentioned the facts of your own boys' development as a human being, as a young man. I so often am reminded that as much as there are very many talented and capable sportsmen and athletes at Michaelhouse, none of them are professional sportsmen yet. And so our task is to guide them in all the various paths which come together, to reach that eventuality.
For sure.
Ryan, in your opinion, in your estimation, where is schoolboy sport in South Africa generally right now, and at Michaelhouse specifically, when we kind of stack it up against the way sport is being carried out at schools in the UK in particular, where you have experience, and in other countries, perhaps Australia, New Zealand?
I think South Africa's biggest strength can also be its biggest weakness. I do need to allude to that before I get onto the positives, is we do have a very high dropout of players that in South Africa. We have, I think the stat is at about 93 or 94% of all first team rugby players give up at 18. Similarly with cricket and other sports. And for me, it's a major issue, and that's a big differing factor from the UK in particular, who are probably more club sport orientated, but they believe in a longevity of a sports person. And if you're playing your sport that you love at 45, 50, that's ultimately a big barometer. That is a success story. And I think Michaelhouse, out of all the schools that I've been to in South Africa, get closest to that process. Dare I say, and forgive me for the parents who are triathletes or mountain bikers, we have the highest amount of those in comparative to other countries as well, because our children are kind of in our schools overused, if I may use that way, is that if they have specialized in a sport and they've been told this is what they're doing, and having 9 or 10 sessions of that a week, and if they don't go beyond and go into varsity cups or universities from a hockey or cricket perspective, they ultimately stop playing. That's not just as a result of the school and how tired and fatigued they might be, but also club systems after school and the pathways. One has to look at water polo, for an example, water polo, I think we've got, in terms of a school system, we've got unbelievable schools and players, but the pathway after school is not great. That being said, we are in danger of becoming specialized in various sports as well. So yes, I think Michaelhouse's beauty is that we've got boys who play dual sports and play 2 or 3 sports and are encouraged to do so. And I think that's a strength and something we need to carry on, and if not make better at Michaelhouse. But I genuinely believe that's the way school sport should be at that moment. Ultimately, we also need to look after the custodians who want to be top-end sportsmen as well. So how are we managing them? I think as an entity might need to improve.
It's interesting that your reference again, that involvement in multiple sports. I've been lucky enough to watch Pat Lambi interacting with Michaelhouse boys at various times. And there was a time, of course, where we used Pat Lambi's name shamelessly as currency with young boys. It's not many 12 or 13-year-old boys who've ever heard of him now, but to watch him and encourage young boys to play all the sports and to learn more about themselves and to develop the skills which will become specific to the sport that they eventually fall in love with, and to watch boys soak that up and then actually live it out was always quite inspirational for me. What part do you think our strength and conditioning program plays in the decision to carry on playing sport after boys have left school and they haven't been contracted, let's say, for argument's sake?
I think the strengthening condition here at Michaelhouse is fantastic. I'll be honest with you. I think the fact that every boy is encouraged to live a healthy lifestyle, and in that wellness program, the gym's strong, but there's boys lifting weights. There's no doubt about it, but not to the extremities of what other schools are doing. So the fact that we look at our injury rates here at Michaelhouse, we don't have a lot for the amount of boys we've got. So that's testimony to the fact that they are playing barefoot outside touch rugby in 2-degree weather. But definitely from an S&C perspective, it's one of the best I've ever seen, to be fair. So we're getting it right. And to the people who implemented that, and to the people who are responsible for that, Michaelhouse owes a huge debt of gratitude to that, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was interesting to me also 2 weekends ago, chatting to a recent old boy who is contracted to a major club in the UK. And he shared with me, in his opinion, having played professional rugby in the UK for close to a year now, that our strength and conditioning program is far superior to the club that he's been contracted to. I found that quite insightful. It's definitely evident that even our sort of C and D team and 5th and 6th and 7th team athletes, they run onto a field as though they're Tarzan. I mean, they feel confident in this piece of equipment. And I suppose in the end, if we remind ourselves it's perhaps 10 or 12% of the whole school roll who are what we'd call elite athletes, first team athletes, to have everybody participating as though they might one day have a crack at it. Hopefully that's what will get them over the bridge of continuing participating after school. Ryan, any celebrity lookalikes? Has anybody ever said you look like a celebrity?
No, I was actually phoned a boy I taught, Mark Fenter. The Durbanites would know him as Mark V, and I think the Joburg guys, he's now on Radio 5. I phoned and said, any advice for me about to go on to this? He said, are you live or are you on camera? I said, I'm on camera. He said, oh, damn it. Then there would have been 2 people with a voice for radio. So in terms of celebrity lookalikes, no, there's not. Yeah, quite embarrassing. Thank you very much. I'd love to think I was in the Brad Pitt realms, but definitely not.
Well, keep hitting the high performance sensor. Who knows what could happen? Ryan, having arrived in the seat a term ago and having weathered the storm of a full winter sports season at Michaelhouse, what do you think is the biggest challenge faced by the sports office at Michaelhouse? Has your perception of that changed since you arrived, now that you've been through a term, or is it the same challenge? What is that challenge?
I think we would be at all for a long time if we went through every single different challenge. I'm conscious that there are parents who are listening whose sons might be budding first team rugby players versus an under 14 hockey player, and vice versa. So I think the biggest challenge is catering for all the participants and
down to depth,
and looking after that. And I don't think we got 1 or 2 things right. So I think we had lots of teams out and for rugby, and I don't think we organised that properly in terms of getting full fixtures, which is something we'll need to improve. But that being said, every single practice I go down to, there's 9s, 10s guys wanting a fixture. We've got for the first time for a while, we had a 5th team hockey come through, almost a 16F hockey as well, which means that boys, and without much cajoling or pushing to get boys to participate. So I think the biggest challenge is catering for that. Our results in our lower teams is phenomenal. If you think about it, we're a school of 650 boys, and for most weeks we are playing against in arguably KZN, which is a very, very tough schooling system. I think if Michaelhouse is, I hope there's not too many Joburg people listening, if Michaelhouse was in Johannesburg, we would be in the top 3 schools. I have no doubt about that. And that's government schools as well. When I say Johannesburg, I probably won't include Uffies into that, that's for sure. But we as a school get that right. So I think the challenge is to maintain that and to keep our lower teams feeling love and feeling the absolute awe that Michaelhouse gives, but at the same time looking at our sort of 18 results at the moment. Some have been very good, and some really big schools. But if we can find a little bit of a way to be a bit more consistent within that
at the top,
I think we need to find that. That being said, we all need to have some realism here. We all need to be realistic. We are a school that doesn't give out 23, 25 scholarships per year to people, and we're a school about that boys want to be here and they're wanting to represent for the right reasons. So I think, whilst we are pushing and we need to be realistic in the fact that we are smaller. We have got a first team rugby player who's doing 5 disciplines of music. He's in a play. For me, that makes a great school. And that doesn't happen very often. So we should celebrate that.
Absolutely.
As well.
So I think you're telling a story of tremendous amount of sporting success, but also, I suppose, educational success in the end. Also, we've got some questions coming in. Janine Purdy, thanks for your question. You've obviously got a couple of boys in the mix here. How does Michaelhouse support boys who are selected for provincial teams? And by that, Janine's questions around how do we manage their academic commitments, their commitments to the boarding life, and just maintaining that balance?
It's a great question. There's quite a thought process at the moment that children are under a lot of pressure. And if you do think about it comparatively to when we were at school, children are under lots of pressure. Sadly, they get compared. There's a lot of comparisons of our son's doing this, or that son's doing that. Shouldn't he be doing that? Type of mentality. So, and that's his academic. He needs to be a great academic. He needs to be a musician. He needs to be able to speak in class well. He needs to be a top quality sportsman. And if you paint that picture, you are putting children under pressure. However, society nowadays is a pressurized environment. So we need to allow that process and boys to fail in that process as well, but protect them from and how they get up versus possibly mowing the lawn to make sure that they don't fail. We do need to do that. How do we manage those people? Sorry, Mr. Pooh, forgive me. I don't know if I've taken my meds for a while, but I need to stay on track. But I think the school really talk to each other. So the academic staff are talking to the tutors, who are talking to the sports coaches.
Again, right.
So the communication, I think, is done very well in this boarding school. You might not see it because you're quite far away, but being in environments, I often have an academic teacher come into my office to say, listen, if it feels like the person's not doing very well academically, how can we support that? How can we take a few training sessions away? Can we look after that person?
It's a network of care that you're talking about, Ryan. If I can add my own sense as part of the response, the boys themselves are given a lot of agency in the decision. In so many cases where a day boy's mum and dad might be, as you mentioned, the analogy, mowing the lawn or making the decisions, the boys are giving agency when it comes to managing their own success and the expectations of them. And I think those are all part of this being an educational process, a holistic.
No, I agree. So in this term in particular, it's a very busy term, with lots of pressure. My general sense is marks do go down in this term, and I think parents mustn't panic from that perspective. It's not this test that might count, it's the next test, and how your son potentially reacts to his next test. So take it on board, take the tutor's comments on board from a report, and then see if they can improve, and find ways to support that. Failing in a test or getting dropped from a team, those aren't bad lessons to learn in life. It's how your sons or how we react to those situations that's the most important.
Yeah. Clem DeSantos, thanks so much for your question. What is our view around boys? And I guess your question is being permitted to specialize at a sport if they're playing that sport at a provincial level. I think often of well, it must have been quite some time ago that he left Greg Oldfield. There was a time that crickinfo.com had renamed the Dilshan sweep the Goldfield sweep after Greg Oldfield. He played for that SA Under-19 team that won the World Cup. And he was always very determined around playing all of the other sports, both individual. He played second team football. He played third team rugby, because for him, he had an awareness as a 17-year-old boy playing for a national team that he had a long professional career ahead of him. And these were kind of his last chances to play everything else. Ryan, from your perspective, though, what would you encourage for young sportsmen, young athletes looking to possibly specialize at a fairly early stage of their careers?
Yeah, there's arguments to both. One can look at a Tiger Woods, Roger Federer. I think only specialized at about 13 or 14, I think it was. So there's examples everywhere. There's arguments for guys who've gone through. A Jacques Callis, who was outstanding, I think played first team rugby. Graham Smith did the same thing from a cricket perspective. It also comes down to the love of a game that you like, but there's no doubt that certain sports have similar skill sets. So, for instance, I can quite pick up and for a lot of the times that which boys have played soccer in spatial awareness and vision. It's a game that I think boys have a natural affinity to space when they do that. And a basketball skills could be easily transferred into rugby skills. Hockey and cricket tend to be quite aligned in terms of certain games. So for me, the world is an oyster here at Michaelhouse, and I believe the boys should absolutely be giving every different opportunity a try. So rather than sitting on their phones in their bed, go play paddle. Go shoot some hoops with your
who knows
your friend.
what might happen.
Who knows what happens? But I'm not even just talking for like becoming a professional. It's also the case of just be out there and be active rather than sitting on a device. And I think Michaelhouse, by having strong things from phones do that. But from a professionalism perspective, yeah, there's arguments to both. I've seen people who specialize become top sportsmen. I think that happens a lot. Sportsmen or women, I think that happens a lot in Europe. But ultimately, I think in a South African context, the more that we can play in the different various sports will definitely help the attributes, to be fair.
Sharks or Lions?
Lions for life. Did I say that loud enough? I'm not sure. Sorry. Please.
Back to the question, Janine, and Purdy's got another question. How do we define schoolboy sporting success? Is it about results? Is it about participating? Is it about personal growth? All of those. Neither of those.
Success, yeah. What is success? So if we feel success is winning every 8 team, again, what was the outcome and process of that, and how you've got to that? For me, success is, are you playing sport for a long time after school? And are you playing the game you love?
It's a much longer view.
Much longer view. If when you're a young child, you pick up a hockey stick, a rugby ball, cricket ball, you enjoy swimming, basketball, soccer. You didn't do that because you wanted to represent South Africa or the Midlands or Michaelhouse first team. You did it because you loved it. So for me, ultimately, success is defined on what kind of legacy you also leave as an individual. We had a boy the other day who was in a tough situation, and he blew me away in terms of his maturity. He said he didn't want to be remembered for perhaps the incident that he did, and it was just so profound to say that that's the legacy he wanted to leave, because that was his family's name, his name, and he didn't want to be remembered for that type of person. That for me is the definition of success. I'm a winner. I won't lie to you, Murray. I like winning. If my sister was listening to me, she'd say, there's things I did in the backyard to my brother a long time ago, which shouldn't be repeated. So yes, it's something I really do enjoy. Do I love standing on the field and seeing Hilton beat Michaelhouse? Absolutely not. But is it the be all and all of life? No.
I was amazed. The sun did come up.
The next day, the sun came out even after the rags went up and down at halftime. But yes, it's so. Do I want Michaelhouse to improve on those stats? Absolutely. But do I want boys to participate from grade 8 to matric and get better as they come through? So
and love it more and
get
more out of it.
Yeah, there's an argument here that's, and if I can, there's elephants in the room, that some people say we maybe don't focus on winning enough at grade 8. My argument to that, and I'm very happy to debate that with parents on the side of the field, is that I think we do, but what we don't want is fearful players, whether they a D team or an E team player versus an A team player. Fear is not the way to do things, and sometimes if you don't do what the coach says or don't do what your parents instructing you to do, they're ultimately not expressing themselves or playing with some freedom. And I think we need to allow that process to go.
You made me just dust off on my prep school Latin. The etymology of amateur sport is amare, to love, from Latin. And that's probably some of the damage that professional sport has done to sport as a whole, schoolboy sport in particular. A question coming in from Rob Mitchell. What are our thoughts, and do we feel that boys are perhaps unfairly penalized for focusing during what might be considered to be a pre-season on high-level sport, a summer sport, while winter sport pre-season or vice versa is taking place? Do we feel that boys are unfairly penalized or on the back foot?
We had a very good MRC's meeting today based on that. We're not a perfect school. I think if our MRCs and are not fighting their corners, I'd be a little bit concerned, but with a collective goal in mind. And I feel that's continuous communication again amongst MRCs. And do we want it to happen? No. I think the reason why we've got educators in the right places is that doesn't happen. And the true message is about education. So for me, not that I've noticed at the moment, from the perspectives and the short time I've been here, I haven't seen that. Can it happen? Yes, I've seen it happen in various schools. Will we as the sports department and the MRCs and the teachers work together to not have that? Yes, we will.
Yes,
Can I guarantee it at times? No, but we will try our utmost to make sure that it doesn't happen. That's for sure.
Absolutely. The sense is that if we're going to stick to our commitment of holism, that should apply to sport and the way a boy approaches pre-season while he's single-mindedly focused on that season sport.
Sure.
I think it's important. Please do keep the questions rolling in while I pose a few more to Ryan from my own jot book over here. What aspect of the sporting culture at Michaelhouse was, in your one term's experience, is way better than you expected it being? Is there anything about the culture of sports at Michaelhouse that it's kind of knocked your socks off? You just, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, Marion, so far the culture is that, you know, a 6-team rugby team against Hilton made Instagram the other day by being creative, and it was fantastic when they were all down to push-ups and the ball was thrown over. Maybe they wouldn't be doing that in the last minute to it, but the culture that I have is I had an argument with not an argument, a slight disagreement with my head of rugby who fought for the 6 team to play on Meadows because it was their last matric game where I wanted to finish the day earlier, but you know, he felt very strongly because he felt the 16, 17, 8 teams needed the right, the right send off. And I think the culture amongst the boys is fantastic. You know, I speak about the teachers and educators a lot, but I think the boys are pushing themselves to be the best possible school. You know, was kind of conversations about government schools government schools down the road, should I say, who, you know, have a perception of what house is or Michaelhouse is, and I think those boys are tired of that. I think the Michaelhouse boys are tired. They don't want to be known as a private school in the middle of Midlands. So I think the culture is carrying itself amongst the boys. We as educators got to make sure that culture remains respectful, and it's got to make it from a sportsmanship perspective. That's for sure.
Now, there's a definite awareness that some of the boys at those big state schools down the road are suffering from Michaelhouse fever. Some of the match days. Question coming in from Tandega Dube. What do we do? How do we assist talented boys kind of to kick on, to take the next steps beyond school if they're really showing promise, ability? How do we, and in what ways are we able to help them beyond school?
It's a very good question. I was told that if you don't know the answer to a question, tell people you'll tell them later. And I definitely, I think in time, if I can answer that one better. However, yeah, I think it's an area where Michaelhouse, you know, when you've explored a few of the international sportsmen that have come out of Michaelhouse, and I think that's great. Dare I say it, I think we could have more, and to assist those top end sportsmen to get there. We're a school with a culture of team ethos. There's no doubt about it. But we've got to allow the exceptional boys a way to get there. So yeah, I think that will come with time. If it does need to be changed, we do need to reinvent the wheel that way. But without losing the culture of the school, we must be careful of that. But we do need to embrace for sure that the top sportsmen can make a living or can reach the heights that are possible. We've got how many UK rugby players at the moment? We've got a few cricketers. Seeing it now and seeing some of the talent in Michaelhouse, I feel we can do more.
Yeah, and if I can just change hats for a moment to parents who are tuned in tonight. Just in recent months, in the last 2 or 3 months, we have 2 old boys who've made it to national colours in different disciplines of canoeing, one in mountain biking, and there are many other disciplines where old boys are playing at the top tier, and they're all standing by and willing and very, very eager to help your boys make connections, talk to the right people, and stand as mentors. So please always do encourage your boys to engage with the Old Boys Club, because the Old Boys Club is always standing by to join those dots for your boys. So outside of the sports department structures, and I know that many of our coaches are well positioned and connected with unions and clubs beyond the school, but the Old Boys Club is just waiting to be utilized on that front. Going back to the questions, Jeff Perkins, good to hear from you again. Ravers, what's your message to parents who wear the disappointment of their son's team omission expectations, and then challenge coaches and so on and so forth. Historically, there's always a lot of this to deal with.
Yeah, we went to parents'
Yeah,
conversations.
so I guess we're taking the gloves off now. You were one of the parents last year. Now you're on the other side of the fence. We'll say it again. How do we? What's the message to the parents?
First and foremost, I've actually been, in terms of the school, blown away by the parent support. Even the mom who, when we did shift the fields for Michaelhouse Hilton, whose old boy husband said, these guys are getting it wrong. I'm sure we could play on this field. And he walked onto Meadows after 10 meters and turned back and he said, we've got it right. She told me that story, and thank you to that for your support. But Jeff, thanks for your question. You know, boys need disappointment. I feel, because it's where you make your money as a parent, and it's where your son rises. And we all have speed bumps. Again, I think for 99.9% of the parents that I've met so far at Michaelhouse, I've felt the support. I felt their love for their children. I think they've got the best interest in heart for their children. I think they're very supportive of the school. If you're that 0.1% that might be cringing now, because you think what I'm going to say is coming your way, is ultimately your boys will lose if you are trying to coach them and you're trying to technically give them advice or whatever it might be. And I can give you an example. So if Murray's son comes into bat and I've told him he needs, his dad says you need to block the first 12 balls, but the game actually needs him to run a ball. What does the boy do? Who does he disappoint? Does he disappoint the dad, or does he disappoint the coach?
Position.
He's in a poor position. Similarly with people who might send hockey tactics or rugby tactics or something to that effect, and shouting grubber kick or drag flick or something to that effect when the coach is given something completely different. And ultimately that's not a good thing. So my message to the parents is keep trusting the process. But if you're not happy, like, reach out. If you want to confront a situation, the sports office, I'm happy to answer and happy to help you out. Whether or not we'll agree or disagree to the main answer, it remains to be seen. But we're doing it with the right intentions. So to answer that question is, what do we do from that expectations? You support your son, you love your son, but you tell your son to work harder. You tell your son to maybe listen to your coach more. Are you a coachable person? Are you doing exactly what your coach has asked for you? But never stop loving the game. Just because you might have gone down a team or you had a disappointment, it's not why we play. You play the game for fun. I'm having that process now with my 15-year-old son who's going through various shifting and changes and emotions. And similarly, it's a conversation I'm having as a parent. So we support them and we love them through it. But please don't try to fight their corner. They do need to stand up for themselves.
Absolutely. And I suppose be prepared for the harsh news sometimes from time to time.
Yeah, for sure.
It's amazing how quickly 38 minutes can whiz by when you're having fun. If you have any last questions, I see there is one from Busani, which I'll come to in a minute or two. Last question from my clipboard. Ryan, what is the big vision? What is the big picture for you? Where do you see Michaelhouse Sport going? Where do you want it to go? What do you want to be remembered for when it comes to the end of your time with Michaelhouse Sport?
I suppose it's the cliche is leave the place in a better place than when you found it. I'm very thankful to the people and to Ryan Stradrick, my predecessor before, who left Michaelhouse in a very, very good place. I think it's quite early to give a definitive answer from that perspective, but I feel the participation levels, the fixtures, find a way for Michaelhouse to be more out there and not just the farm school in the middle of the Midlands, is something for us, but not just out there from a more fixtures or winning or whatever it might be, is that to continue the name where I think we're the talk of much of the country at the moment,
and not just because of our line-out calls in the 6th team.
No, definitely not. I think we're the talk of a country because we're getting the holistic education element right. And I and I feel that's very important. Tweaks percentages wise where we can improve for sure. There are various elements. Do I want Michaelhouse to be known as the best private school in South Africa from a sporting perspective? Hands down, yes, of course. But what one of the questions, what does that mean for success?
Yep.
How are we going to define that? Are we going to define that on win-loss ratios? We're going to define it on how many sportsmen play for national teams, or we're going to define it on that every boy who's left Michaelhouse has played with the jersey right till the end and got better than what he began. You know, a lot of the grade 8s arrive here at Michaelhouse and they all believe they're the best from their prep schools. And dare I say it, sometimes the parents feel that their son's the best from that prep school and to marry that culture takes time. You know, no business that I know of, has turned around a culture in 2-3 weeks. A business or a school takes time to do that. Similarly for a team, you know. And one of the best things I got received this week was a Teams message from the mountain bike captain saying, can he make next term a main sport? I had the canoeing captain come to me and say, he's only got 15 canoeists. Can I support him in making his club bigger? And that for me was quite profound, to be fair. So, you know,
there's a lot of get up and go.
There's a lot of get up and going. And dare I say, personal goal is to become a way better fisherman than I am at the moment, because I'm decidedly useless.
It will be one of those, the case of practicing more to get luckier. Well, Sani, if you have your pen with you, it's oldboys@michaelhouse.org. If not, just go to www.michaelhouse.org, scroll to the bottom of the page, and under quick links, you'll be able to get in touch with Ron Rutland, the director of the Old Boys Club. Will be very happy to help out. I think that all remains is for me to thank everybody who's taken the time again to join us tonight. Ryan, thank you so much for your time. Good luck as you move into your second term of steering the sports ship at Michaelhouse. Enjoy having your boys at home for the holidays, and we'll see you for a chilled third term sports season in a few weeks' time. Good night.